How much money are you worth? Did you come out of the pandemic ahead or behind from where you started money-wise? You may not know how to answer those questions. It is a bit more complex than just checking how much money you made last month. They can also be uncomfortable questions to think about. What if the answer is below your expectations? Or what if you're worth negative money? Is that even possible? Today, I'm going to explain how to answer those uncomfortable questions by covering two opposing topics that you've probably heard of before, but may never have gone in depth on. Before I continue, I want to note that this is the second video I've made so far on personal finance. You don't need to watch the first video to understand this one, but it might help. I'll put a link at the top right corner right now just in case you want to check it out first, then come back later. Anyways, let's get started. The two ideas we're covering in this video are called assets and liabilities, or how much you own and how much you owe. It does get a little more nuanced and complicated than that, so don't run off just yet thinking you're a financial powerhouse. Getting a good assessment on your assets and liabilities will be key to developing your financial future. If you want to buy a house in the future, pairing this knowledge with income and expenses will put you ahead of the curve when starting your house hunt. Or if you already own a house, then keeping a finger on the pulse of your assets and debts can set you up for earlier retirement and a more comfortable living. While the opposite of income is an expense, the best friend and trusted ally of income is an asset. At the end of the day, all an asset is something of value that you own and can either use to make cash or can turn into cash if you need to. The concepts of income and assets are inherently intertwined. While income looks at your money over time, for example, you're getting paid this Friday, an asset is where that money is sitting right now and how you can access it. For example, you deposit that pay into your bank account. So, the bank account you put your income into at the end of the week, as long as it's worth more than zero, that is an asset to you. If you're lucky enough to own a house, even if it's mortgaged, at least a portion of that house is an asset to you. Do you own any bonds, stocks, or have a retirement account? Those are all assets. Even if you have a car in the driveway, bingo, that's an asset. If you don't own any assets like these currently, no judgment at all. Everyone's life circumstances are different, or you may just be young and haven't entered that stage of your life yet. What is important is that you're here now and willing to learn. Once we learn a bit more about assets in general, I'll suggest where you can start when building up your base of assets, so stick around. Just as all income is not created equal, neither are assets. Fundamentally, there are a few characteristics of an asset that determine how good or bad of an asset it is. In no particular order, the first characteristic is all about how easily or quickly that asset can be turned back into money. The bank account you own is pretty simple. If you show up to the bank or use your debit card, you are effectively turning that account into cash. A car or a house, on the other hand, will take more time and effort to turn into cash if you need to. Stocks and bonds can actually be turned into cash very easily, even if the bond is not matured. The fancy term for how easily you can turn an asset into cash is called liquidity, but don't worry about memorizing that term right now. The main takeaway here is that it is easier to turn some assets into cash than others, and that everything else being equal, a more liquid asset is better than a less liquid one. A second characteristic of an asset is whether or not it is likely to change in value while you're holding onto it. Hopefully, any asset you're holding onto increases in value, like your bank account gathering interest, your stocks and bonds increasing in price, and your house increasing in value. These are great assets to own and can be very useful places to keep any spare money you might have so that if and when you need it later, you can get more back from it than you initially put in. They can also fight against the forces of inflation, which is a concept we'll cover in a later video. There are assets, however, that are much more likely to decrease in value when you hold on to them. Cars are a great example of this. The older they get and the more miles you put on them, the less valuable they become. They're still needed for a good chunk of people though, so don't go selling your car just because I said it's a bad asset. You can still use the car to get to and from work and make your life easier in a million other ways. The key here is that if you're looking to sink some spare money into an asset in the hopes that it will be worth more in the future than it is right now, a car is one of the last places to look. Stocks and bonds can also decrease in value over time if the underlying company or government gets into trouble, so just know the risks you should be aware of when investing your hard-earned money. There's one other characteristic of an asset that may not apply to everyone, but it can certainly improve your overall understanding, and that is whether an asset can make you money when added with your time and labor. What I mean here will be a bit more obvious if you've ever owned your own business. Did you have any tools or resources that made you money? A carpenter needs a good saw, a graphics designer needs a powerful computer, and a musician needs an instrument. If this applies to you, your tools of the trade are assets to you in a slightly different way than a stock or a house might be, but they're still assets nonetheless. The main exception I'll highlight is that you personally are not a financial asset in this sense. Yes, you may have years of experience, decades of schooling, and the physical strength to perform any job in the world, but in a financial sense at least, you yourself are not an asset. Sorry to burst your bubble, I still think your beautiful smile is an asset to this world in general, just not financially. So, where do you start if you don't have any assets right now? My advice to you would be to first build up an emergency fund. or as I alternatively like to call it, an oh shit fund. This will be money for when a situation in your life pops up and immediately makes you think, oh shit. Lose your job? Oh shit. Need to see the dentist unexpectedly, or a surprise pregnancy test showed positive? You're in oh shit territory, my friend. The key here is to build up between 3 to 6 months worth of your normal expenses and leave that money alone for your next oh shit moment. Doesn't matter if it's $5 at a time or $500 at a time. It will probably take a while to save up this emergency fund, and you're right. Assets take time to build. That's a key difference between them and income. From there, you have a bit more choice in your next asset. While a car is a bad financial asset, it can be tremendously useful and give you freedom and add other value to your life. If you have no need for a car, investing in an indexed fund is a quick way to speed up the growth of your assets. Maybe you work in a trade and a new tool could make you a bunch more money in the long run. You know your unique situation better than I do, so I'll leave it to you to determine what is the best path forward. You'll have more than enough time to gloss over the options I've provided while building that emergency fund. At the end of the day, assets are all the things of value you can tap into. If your income is currently higher than your expenses, then your assets will naturally be increasing over time, which is an ideal scenario in personal finance. However, if your expenses begin to outpace your income, they can drain on your assets. If you have no more assets available to you and this pattern continues, you will either be forced into debt, which we'll talk about in a second, or potentially be forced to declare bankruptcy as a last resort. Avoiding bankruptcy and unnecessary debt should be top priority when considering your finances. That's why I'm covering this topic so early in my series. So, without getting too preachy, let's talk about what debt is and how we can work with it. Just as income is to expenses, assets are to liabilities. While assets are things that you can tap in to get cash, a liability is going to tap into you and take your cash away. Wherever you owe money, whether it's a long-term debt such as a mortgage or car payment, or a short-term bill like hydro that's due next week, that's a liability. Liabilities can be many for the simple reason that banks, credit card companies, or worst of all, payday loan services want to give you any excuse you can come up with to owe them money. When you borrow money, keyword being borrow, that has to be paid back later. That specific liability is called a debt. Debt is just a type of liability, but it is the largest and primary liability that most of us will encounter. In an ideal world, the only thing you'll ever go into debt for is for purchasing a house and maybe a car in specific circumstances. All debt that is not absolutely essential for your survival or that would make you more money in the long run than the debt is worth should be paid off with extreme prejudice. If you're in this type of debt, specifically longer term or high interest debt, your first priority will be to lower the interest rate to the minimum that you can find. Banks and credit unions can often offer you lower rates and help you out of a deep hole that credit cards and payday loans have dug. The difference between a 21% credit card and a 3% bank interest rate can mean years and thousands of dollars depending on your debt size. From there, pay down your debts as aggressively as you can. After that, there honestly isn't much to say about bad debt. It's relatively simple, just extremely addicting and dangerous. It's remarkably easy to rack up thousands of dollars in high-interest debt for things that you do not need to survive, and there's no way around saying that this type of debt is flat-out terrible for your financial well-being. What you may not know is that all debt is not always a bad thing. Just as fire can destroy your home, burn your skin, and scorch your marshmallows, fire can also heat your home, keep you warm, and perfectly roast your marshmallows. When dealing with debt, you just need to know that you're playing with fire, but sometimes that fire can be vital to our survival or ability to thrive. Recognizing that danger is the first and most important step, and from there we can work on distinguishing good debt from bad and how you should frame your mind to use this knowledge to your advantage. Just as some assets are better than others, some types of debts can be better than others. As a general principle, you should not go into debt for something you either do not need to survive or for something that will not increase your assets or income by more than the debt is worth. Starting with the obvious, if you have no money available and need food, water, and shelter, debt is non-negotiable. You may need to ask a family member or friend for a short-term loan for your basic survival, or if your situation is more dire, then you'll have to pull out the credit card from the kitchen drawer. Going into debt is slightly more preferable to starving to death or becoming homeless, so if you need to, don't worry about making that decision. Once your basic survival needs are met, however, there are specific situations that we can use debt in ways to increase our income. For example, let's assume that right now your bank account balance is super low, you do not own a car, you have a job offer on the opposite side of town that pays double what you're making down the road, and finally there's no subway or bus routes. The problem we have here is that getting across town on foot is not reasonable. You don't have enough money to purchase a car without going into debt, but you don't have a way of generating good money without getting a car. You're in a catch-22 catch-22 situation here, with debt being one of the rare good options available to you. Yeah, you could rely on friends and family to drive you around multiple times a day, but this strategy is annoying to them at best and an unreliable long-term solution. At the end of the day, you decide it's time to go car shopping. This, however, means we have to go into debt. We have to play with fire. We have learned to respect the dangers of debt though, so we should be fairly equipped to play with fire without getting burned. We know that all else being equal, a lower interest rate on that debt is better because that will lower our expenses over time. Believe it or not, you can shop around for different interest rates when going into car debt. You do not necessarily need to finance through the car dealership itself. Banks will often be able to offer you a lower interest rate than the dealership can, so it is worth your time to explore that option. We also know that cars are not the greatest assets to own, so we do not want to overextend ourselves on an unnecessarily expensive car. For now, we just need a reliable enough car to get us to and from work and wherever else we may need to go. So that means we're buying used. The type of car also matters. If your job doesn't require an SUV or truck, just get a normal sized car. They will almost always be cheaper, so you will not need to go into as much debt, and other expenses like gas, insurance, and taxes will also be lower. The only remaining piece of the puzzle we have not already learned about is how long we will be in debt for, often called the term. All this means is asking yourself if you're going to take a month to pay off the debt, a year, 3 years, 5 years, etc. All else being equal, the longer we take to pay off the debt, the lower the monthly payments are going to be. Lower payments at a first glance seem very inviting, but they virtually always mean that over the course of the loan you will be paying more in interest than if you chose a shorter term loan. Paying a 3% loan off in 1 year will always be cheaper than paying it off in 3 years. The longer you're being hammered with interest on your debt, the more money you will be paying in the long run. For this reason, you should pick an appropriate term and monthly payment based on your ability to settle the debt in a reasonable time to you. Do not automatically be enticed by lower monthly payments for a longer period of time when considering paying off debt. By making higher payments for a shorter period of time, you will benefit in the long run overall. Short-term pain is long-term gain. An expensive new car is a bad thing to be in debt on, but a cheap used car is acceptable. Houses are a rather solid example of good debt because the asset you're buying is likely to increase in value faster than the percentage interest you're paying. It's not a certainty, as the 2008 financial crisis may have shown you, but it is more likely than not. As with most things, you need to take at least a little risk if you want to be rewarded. So, we now know 2 examples of good debt, but make no mistake, there are countless examples of bad debt. Debt is a resource available to you when your existing income or assets cannot provide either your survival or an opportunity to generate more income and assets. If you choose to go into debt in a scenario that does not match that description, you're almost certainly venturing into bad debt territory. An example of bad debt would be non-essential spending when your income and assets cannot support you doing so. Going into debt for entertainment, like going to a concert, vacation, or going out to eat, is straight up a bad idea. Not only are you paying once for the experience itself, but you're also going to pay the bank, credit card company, or whatever other entity a premium just for the privilege of doing so. That means compared to every other person with you at the concert, vacation, resort, or restaurant, you're paying more than they are. Once or twice may not seem like a big deal, but if you do this over the course of years or your entire life, you're absolutely bleeding money that you do not need to be spending. And the banks and credit card companies will be more than happy to take that money from you. These are the types of debt that burn your hand, destroy your house, and ruin your marshmallows. If you make the decision to go into debt, no matter if it's buying a house or buying an ice cream cone, always ask yourself if the debt is necessary and advantageous to your financial well-being. And if it's not, then muster your willpower and forego the unnecessary expenses. You should never buy something you don't need with money you don't have.
Advertising sells you things you don't need and can't afford that are overpriced and don't work.
Other liabilities often include bills we've received but haven't paid yet. A phone bill, internet, insurance, that kind of thing. It's an expense you know is about to happen, but you haven't actually paid the bill yet, so it's not really an expense that day. If you're smart with your credit card, a great way to keep out of credit card debt is to pay off your balance in its entirety every single month. In doing this, that balance is never translated into debt and therefore not subject to the crazy high interest rates that go along with it. For the most part, your control over these liabilities is actually covered in my expenses video. So if you need to tackle your recurring bills, I can recommend you watch that video after this one wraps up in a minute. At the beginning of the video, I asked you how much money you're worth, and so far I haven't answered that question. So let's handle that before getting on with our day. If you take all your assets and add them together, then take all your liabilities and add them together, you are financially worth the difference in those two numbers. This is also called your net worth, total assets minus total liabilities. Granted, your situation may be complex and adding those two numbers may take a bit of thought and time, but you now know what assets and liabilities are, and from there it's just a bit of work to list them all out and get your final number. From there, you can begin to increase your assets by ensuring your income is greater than your expenses, which you can do by either increasing your income or decreasing your expenses. I know it's easier said than done, but it needs to be done regardless. Long periods of decreasing assets, at least before retirement where your income is greatly reduced, is a dangerous path to be on, where expenses from debt can pile on top of each other and spiral out of control. Long periods of increasing assets can remove a massive layer of stress from your life and can usher you into a life of financial well-being, which is an aspiration best started today. I hope you found this video useful. If you did, consider checking out the rest of my channel where I'll be building on this foundation for you to improve your financial health and set you up for future success. You can also like this video so others in your position can find the channel more easily and subscribe to be notified of future videos. As always, I wish you the best of luck on your journey of increasing your financial well-being and have a great day.